Um,
Case.
Setting up a meeting. Okay. Oh, your mom will be watching us. So, um, okay. Cool. Setting.
You gotta keep.
Great. Hello, YouTube. We are live. Everything worked out. I'm always so like nervous before hosting just for for all the Zoom and YouTube stuff to work out. Hello, big YouTube audience. Good morning in the morning. We're gonna wait a couple of more minutes so that our group is here. So Michelle and Chris are apparently here because the lights are on, but I didn't see them, so potentially they got kidnapped. Um, Although it will be difficult to kidnap them. Hey, we have Eva.
If if they were, someone is gonna return them very quickly.
Hi Eva, how you doing?
Whoop.
Oop, we are on stream.
Hello.
Eva.
Did you celebrate properly last week?
Yeah, properly.
What is
Good.
celebrate? Birthday?
Graduation.
Ah, congrats.
Cum laude.
Ah, amazing. Well, we didn't expect anything less, right? So,
Yeah, you know, Eva, you just did your duty. Shut
yeah,
up.
exactly. That's a given, no?
Okay, you're next, Eduardo. So
Lilith is next, not me.
yeah, but Lilith will deliver.
Come on.
It's just gonna up the stakes.
Congrats, Eva. Well deserved. Well done. Very
Thank
cool.
you.
And now it's yeah, you're looking for a grant for the PhD, or how is that situation going?
We'll see if PhD or another RA,
Okay.
but yeah.
But we're not losing you. You're staying in research.
Yes, not if I can help it, for sure.
Okay, we are four people, and I'll give it 2 more minutes, I guess.
Did the hotel work out? I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought she was in an aquarium first.
Not in the car.
That would have been a possibility according to the state of.
No, all good, all good. Should we make a start and then people just drop in as they come?
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. Hello, everyone. All the three of you. Welcome to Neuroccino, our online journal club, every given Monday at 9:30 Amsterdam, Paris time, Central European time, right? Today, Eduardo is presenting, and we're delving into the comparison of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens as as long as I am still correctly informed, and language, because Steph is still here, so we still need to do language. Also, it's not a mistake in the matrix that you see a double Stephanie Forkel. I'm hosting because Steph is in London giving speeches and being awesome. So, Eduardo, if you want to take it away, you shared the link already in the chat, I see, completely well prepared. I'm gonna share it on YouTube in the commentaries so that everyone can take a look at the paper who is following us on YouTube. And if you want, Eduardo, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Such a great host. So you should be able to see my screen.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Yeah, so as you mentioned, today is gonna be not really Neanderthals and language, but let's say Neanderthals and auditory capacity in Neanderthals compared to Homo sapiens. And so the reason why is that so if you for any one of you that is familiar with the language literature, language neurobiology literature, you know, every paper starts with you know, humans are such an amazing species, we are the only one to have language, blah blah blah, which is true as per today, but our branch of let's say of evolution is quite lonely branch in the sense that all our closest relatives went extinct at a certain point, and we don't really know whether they had something like language or some pieces of computation in their brain that might resemble to language. But this is of course interesting because one of the main problem with language is that we are really struggling in explaining its evolution. So apparently it popped out with Homo sapiens, and we don't really know how. It seems like quite too fast for an evolutionary process. So yeah, I thought it could be interesting to look into the literature related to our closest relative in the evolutionary tree, so to speak. Not really a tree, but anyway, which is the Neanderthals. This is, I think, so one of the reasons to look into the Neanderthals is because we have a better archaeological record, and we have traces of complex behaviors in the archaeological records, and possibly also traces of symbolism, which is, according to the language literature, one of the key abilities that a species should be able to master in order to have language, which is a symbolic processing of sounds or representations or whatever. We already know that Neanderthals are quite close to us because we interbreeded with them, and we know they had a similar brain capacity in terms of volume as similar to Homo sapiens, and people are also still arguing whether they had a vocal tract similar to ours. So in order to produce sounds that are required for speech, which is the main medium for language for humans. Yeah, so this paper is delving more in detail into the auditory capacity of Neanderthals, because these would allow to estimate what the brain was able to perceive in terms of speech. And so what they did is to do a CT scan of the inner ear, sorry, outer and medium ear structure of some Neanderthal specimens. I think they try to collect as many as possible. Here you can see some example of the 3D reconstruction of these CT scans. And what they did is to use a model based on the physiology of the auditory system of the ear, which allows to estimate how what is called the sound power transmission, which is how sound is transmitted across the ear and eventually to the brain. And this sound power transmission is sort of filtering processing that allow to estimate also the occupied bandwidth, which is the range of frequencies that can reach potentially the brain. I could put it really simple, or at least the inner ear, and then from there the brain. The point is that the occupied bandwidth in modern humans is correlated to the quality of speech perception. So if you have a reduced bandwidth, you can hear really well. So if the point is, if we can manage to reconstruct this occupied bandwidth in Neanderthals, we are able to estimate the sound that they could potentially hear, and of course the sound that they could potentially produce, assuming that you're not going to produce sound that you cannot perceive yourself. Previous studies already looked into some early hominins that had occupied bandwidth similar to. So the point is, very early hominins had a occupied bandwidth that is more similar to today's chimps. But like later hominins, not yet Neanderthals, but closer to Homo sapiens, apparently they were already investigated, and they had a bandwidth, an occupied bandwidth that is sort of like in between, is different from chimps, but not yet as well defined as the one of Homo sapiens, especially for the higher frequencies. And so what they did here is to report, reanalyze some Neanderthals and add some new specimens. And so they had 5 Neanderthals specimens, 9 early hominins from a cave in Spain. There are probably some pre-Neanderthal hominins, so not yet Neanderthals, but before, and 10 modern humans. And they computed this sound power transmission and occupied bandwidth. And the results are the following. It's a fairly simple graph. So as you can see, we have frequencies on the x-axis and the occupied, like the power on the in decibel on the y-axis. And you can see Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, they are not, so they're not statistically speaking, they're not different from each other. And these early hominins, probably ancestor of Neanderthals, they are slightly different from both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens in the, especially in the higher frequency. So from 3.5 kilohertz on, this is like the sounds that could potentially, like, so the frequencies that could potentially reach the brain, given the structure of the ear. And yeah, so this table reporting the comparisons, I guess statistical results. And as you can see, there is a difference between these early hominins and Neanderthals and Homo sapiens as well. But the last row, Neanderthals versus Homo sapiens, the difference is not statistically speaking significant. So yeah, apparently, according to this data, modern humans and Neanderthals had a similar auditory capacity, meaning that they could perceive the same sounds as we do and potentially also produce the same sounds as we do. And now this is not a proof that, of course, Neanderthals had language, because it's just a clue that they could produce or receive the same sounds. But at the same point, you might ask then, why would you have such a complex infrastructure to produce really precise sounds if you're not doing anything with it? And yeah, so I think the most important part is that the similarity between Neanderthals in the higher part of the spectrum, so for the higher frequencies, because this is the range of frequencies that is mostly important for consonants in modern languages, especially for the voiceless plosives like t and k, or voiceless fricatives like f, s, or th. And these are really important in most of the languages. Most of the languages we know have this kind of consonants, and also one of the things that is really important is that since they are voiceless, they do not propagate across the environment a lot. So it's something you can use to communicate on a relatively short scale. And yeah, so that's more or less it. What they do suggest is that if it's on top of this auditory capacity, if Neanderthals, like, they show a really, we know they showed a really sophisticated, social structure. They had sophisticated survival strategies, tool making, hunting in groups. They made systematic use of fire. They were able to care for injured individuals in their groups, and possibly they also made some parietal art, which are all things related to complex communicative skills. So the idea that they might have had something similar to language is not, it's at least not absurd. And what I think the most compelling evidence is that we share a lot of DNA with them. So we interbreeded with them many times, and today most of humans, they have 1 to 4% of Neanderthal genes, meaning that the offspring of this interbreeding was successful in surviving, and somehow they passed down these genes to us. But yeah, so this is the paper. Try to keep it short. This is okay. There's another figure which is basically the same stuff. You can see the comparison with a bar plot, where you can see all the various specimens and the occupied bandwidth on the y-axis. But yeah, curious to know what you think and if you have any question.
I actually have.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. First question.
Well, it's more food for thought kind of thing, because I never actually thought about it until you just mentioned it. But you said that we can't produce sounds that we cannot hear. Is that right?
Well, in the context of language, I would think it's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah. I find that an interesting thought. Never really thought about
I
it.
mean, what's especially evolving such a capacity for such a high frequency spectrum doesn't really seems to fit with, oh, it just happened evolutionarily in our closest relative, and then they didn't have language at all. So I mean, yeah, probably we can produce sounds we cannot hear, but is there an evolutionary pressure for that? I don't think so, right?
What about those, you know how sometimes in movies, I think it's actually a real thing that like you can raise your voice that high that it makes glass break. Is that a real thing? I mean, that's also, we can hear the frequency up to a certain, like we know it's very, very high, but then up until the point where the glass breaks, where you see a physical effect, you don't hear it really anymore, right? What about that?
Yeah, but that's also the intensity of the sound, right? It's not just the frequency. You could produce a really high frequency sound even with a really low voice. Uh, and yeah, I think just it's curious because it's really the part of the spectrum that is really, really important for consonant. And I mean, that's of course there's an entire debate on that, but the consonants are possibly some of the most important aspects of language, because they really allow to discriminate words, probably way better than vowels, you could say. But yeah, so another thing is that apparently we have a FOXP2 gene that is really, really similar to the one of the Neanderthals. There is just one nucleotide that is different, apparently. The Neanderthals, they finally found a few years ago hyoid bone, which is a bone in your throat, and then it depends like what kind of model of speech production you try to set up, but it's considered to be some important part in defining how the vocal trots is placed and how well you can produce sounds. And the hyoid bones of this one Neanderthal is basically undistinguishable from the one of humans, modern humans. And there is an ongoing debate on whether, yeah, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens have this same vowel space in terms of production. But yeah. So of course this is an assumption. You're saying, okay, we are relying on the fact that it's this stuff is important. I think one of the thing that is really pointing into this direction is that if you present humans with sounds where the frequencies are disturbed, so you introduce some noise and you reduce the occupied bandwidth of the sound itself, then people have trouble in perceiving the sort of like vocoded speech, where you have like a filtered speech where you remove the high frequencies. Then the people really have trouble in discriminating the sounds. This is what happens, for example, with cochlear implants, where you can recover some of of course, the power transmission, but not completely. So the high frequencies are especially affected. And people with a cochlear implant, of course, they can hear, and it's better than nothing, but it's not like a perfect, a functioning ear. So yeah.
Did they say anything about how well the specimens were preserved? Because they did a scan of the inner and middle ear, right? So
Yeah. So what they did, they say something about this. It's not a big specimen, of course, but Neanderthals fossils do not grow on trees. But they say they only used, let's see if I can retrieve the passage. They only used complete specimens.
Mhm.
Pop, pop. I think it's somewhere now here. Yeah, can't find the passage. But yeah, they mentioned it. They say they only used they only use complete specimens of Neanderthal, so they excluded some previous specimens they had in some previous reports. Um,
I have, meanwhile, maybe another question that
Yep.
is perhaps not possible to answer from the paper, but perhaps Steph or you language people, at least who have more knowledge on that than me, know how is that how are those capacities that you were talking about, Eduardo, how are they related like in to the development of a child? How is it like and like how is it basically associated with learning how to speak, learning a language? Is it, yeah, would you, if you would have a specimen of the innate ear, right, that they were looking into in the paper here of a baby, would it also show differences or similarities to Neanderthals perhaps, or like chimpanzees? Sometimes you have like, you know, those correlates of like babies and chimpanzees, because like the more babies develop at some point, the more capacities they develop.
Yeah,
Where
so
like, yeah.
I don't know for the development. They mention that the volume and the structure of the outer and medium and middle ear is related somehow to the general size of the skull. Um, but yeah, I don't know for the development. Steph, do you have any?
No, we're talking outside the brain now.
Yeah,
Not sure what
just
happens.
outside of brain and we're lost. I don't know. So what I know though is that in development, like children, they can perceive sounds like since birth, basically. Actually, they can perceive language sounds better than we do as adults, right? Because at a certain point, the range of sounds that are perceived as language units, they're narrowed down to a certain set, and that set is the set of sounds of the language that is spoken nearby the children. So I don't know about the structure of the inner, sorry, not the inner, sorry, middle and outer ear in this case. But I think in humans that's not a problem. I mean, children can hear. I'm also assuming the general structure is not changing too much because you have the cochlea and the ear like implanted into the bone. So major changes might, I don't know, squish the organs. But yeah, I don't really know.
In terms of structural development, absolutely no idea. That,
No, me neither. Neither.
but you're right that babies, even before birth, are sensitive to sounds, and they can distinguish their mother tongue from other languages already at that point. Obviously not based on linguistic structure or words or anything, but purely the intonation, the prosody, and that happens super early on. So we recently discussed this in another journal club where the conclusion was that our auditory system is actually much better developed than our visual system, because you're born with the ability to distinguish sounds much better, whereas human babies struggle to see properly in the beginning. And as far as I know, there's also first couple of weeks, I think, is just black and white, for example. So this the
Really?
apparently, yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't know that.
maybe not that bad, but it's really like the high frequencies of the spectrum in the visual spectrum are really hard to see because you have not been exposed to that anyway before, right? So there is some light changing, I guess, in the uterus, but yeah, babies.
But taking like one step further and taking in the developmental aspect, for example, what I know is for babies with emotion recognition, right? They're like in the early stages where they don't have well, either theory of mind, that's like a very, very advanced step in that case, but the babies are able to distinguish obviously the basic emotions, but there are like children in general perform on the level of chimpanzees when it comes like to emotional detection of of um, yeah sad, like positive and negative emotional facial expressions, and it gets better the older children get, obviously, and the more exposure to the like different expressions they have. So I was wondering, yeah, with my question, whether that similar thing basically happens with sounds as well, like the more they are the more able they are to speak when they learn to how to speak a language, whether it's kind of like linked to the auditory system and like.
I mean, I think the perception system develops like quicker and earlier than the production system. But yeah, it might be something similar to the visual system, but even faster. Because I mean, babies they're really good at discriminating sounds of languages when they're just born. So that's I'm not sure about the answer, but I would say yeah, either there is already well-developed auditory system, or the development is really quick after birth. But yeah, so
So then
I don't know how this relates, but hmm.
So Steph just sent a link into our chat.
A slight correction. It's not completely black and white. But the visual system in the beginning is slightly blurry and like a gray filter over the colors a little bit. So apparently in the first week they can see intense red and green colors, and then at 2 months they can see bluish colors until red and green colors apart. And then the full rainbow develops over time.
That's super interesting. How did they find out? It's not like they could ask.
They did in a way. So I just very briefly skimmed it. And here, if at birth you show a baby a very bright red and white light, they look for longer at the red light than the white. So we know they can tell those two colors apart. And classical studies would be like suction studies where the kids apparently respond better to one thing than the other. But I'm leaving my comfort zone here, so you might want to double check that.
Yeah. I mean, to go back to the more general picture, it was just our last common ancestor that is still living. So so we have the chimps as closest relative in the fabric of evolution, and we split from those lineage something in between 4 and 12 million years ago. And then language pops out, so it's difficult to sustain from an evolutionary perspective that humans are really the only one species that had something that we can call language, because we are a really late stage of evolution. We have been around for like what, 200,000 years. Even Neanderthals, they were around for longer, like 500,000 years. They were really successful in different environments. And so yeah, I don't know.
Well, this is potentially a paper for next time or to be continued. Our time is almost up here. And if there is no further question from our YouTube community, which I can't see at the moment, and here in our little journal club group neither, then I would like to thank Eduardo for presenting this amazing paper and for walking us through it, and also the very cool discussion, although we were only 4 people. Well done, guys. I hope everyone enjoyed. And there is a CNS talk this week on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central European time. And Jessica Dubio is presenting. Yeah, well, with the last names and yeah, pronunciation may not be the best, but join. It's for free and everyone's welcome. So yeah, thanks a lot. There's
I
something.
think some of the questions that we raised today but couldn't answer, she'd be the right person to ask, because her talk is going to be on the first 1,000 days of the development of children.
Cool.
So save those questions for Wednesday and ask an
Exactly.
expert.
Exactly. Very, very good. So a nice fade into a more detailed view on how children develop in the first 1,000 days. I'm taking care of a baby tomorrow, so I'm freaking out already. All right. Have an
You
exciting
can
week
check
in
whether they can
science.
hear sounds specifically.
Yeah, I'm gonna come there with like my entire set of psychological experiments that I can test, the red dot and everything that I learned back in my bachelor's.
I did that with the other two, so to keep it consistent.
Can you send me your test battery so we have like the entire, we'll keep it scientific as well. So
Share the
all
chart.
right. Thank you for joining. Thank you for participating and viewing us. See you next week on Monday, 9:30 a.m. Have an exciting week in science. Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.
Done.
Thank you. Are we still live?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, still to our live community.